Hey, this is John, and I thought I'd go live today because I am in the middle of teaching a leadership series that is on basically how to be as productive as possible, how to be organized. And so rather than do the email I was going to do today, I thought I would just actually do a recording of it here on a YouTube Live. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about delegating. Specifically, we're going to talk about 5 power tips to delegate almost anything. All right, so let me go to my iPad here so I can show you guys this. And here we go. All right, so the first tip that I want to talk to you about is delegating. When you try to delegate, is you want to workflow before you go. All right, and what that means is this: is you've got to come up with a plan to get from you know from starting a task to ending a task. And if you're doing something as simple as, like, let's just say scheduling. So maybe the first task is you want to delegate your scheduling of musicians to an assistant. This is actually a pretty there's a lot of moving pieces there, and so that's something you need to workflow out and say, okay, how do we do this? Well, first we need to know who's available, and we need to know what kind of band we need each week, if you have a rotating type of system, or if you have a availability based system. And so you want to try to workflow this out. Now, you may use there may be some other sort of task that you want to delegate, maybe something simpler, just like, hey, like for those of you who are full-time worship leaders or part-time worship leaders and you have to turn in receipts for things, maybe you just want to get somebody else to do your receipts. And rather than you have to fill out the forms or whatever you have to do for your church, just think about, okay, maybe someone else can do that. By the way, I had somebody do that for me and it was really nice. But what you need to do is you've got to figure out, what are the steps that it takes to do this? Well, I have to gather my receipts. I have to figure out what their what part of the budget they're coming from. So, like, numbers or categories, however your budget works. Then we also have to get those written out. Maybe you have a form you have to write out. Then you have to submit that form, and so on. And so, there's all the steps. And so what I did is I got to the point where, I basically just gathered my receipts, and I'm just going to abbreviate that. I gathered my receipts, and I would just take a picture of them and send them to my assistant, and then she would just basically do it all. And then we even came up with, like, okay, if she pretty much knew, like, okay, if it was from a restaurant, it was from my expense account, and went off to lunch with someone. If it was from Sweetwater, obviously it was an instrument or something like that. So we kind of had a code and a shorthand for knowing that, okay, most receipts, she had an idea of what they'd be for and what category or what line item they would come out of. And so I got to the point where all I had to do was this, and occasionally answer a question for her with this. So I just gather my receipts, take a picture of them, send them to her, and then she did the rest of this, and it was awesome. All right. So when it comes to workflowing, you've got to workflow before you let go. And what that is all about is that if you've ever given a task to somebody and you hand it off to them, say, hey, will you do this for me? And then it just falls apart. And what happens is you probably, if it fell apart, you probably didn't figure out all the different steps to go from start to finish. And they either didn't understand some section in here, or they missed this step, or something up here wasn't clear. And so what happens then is that you think, oh, delegation, it doesn't work, right? Forget it. This doesn't work. So I'm not going to do it. But if you take the time and you actually spend time figuring, okay, here's the steps that need to happen. Here's where we need to go. Here's what needs to go on. Here's when things need to be done. So let me give you a few pointers for workflowing. So obviously break the project into steps, or break the task into steps, into the smallest possible steps. And then say, okay, what needs to be accomplished in each step? All right. So what needs to be accomplished here? All right. And then who is responsible for this step? And then when is this step due? Back for my receipts here, in this situation here, what happened is, when was due the first of the month. And so I needed to make sure I got her, or whenever it was due, I needed to make sure I got my assistant, my receipts, before that, so she could get it done. And so there was a few different steps here. But for each step, you figure out what needs to happen, who is responsible for that step, when is that step due? And then when you're first teaching this, why is important too? Why is this step important? Now for smaller tasks, you may not need to worry about this, but maybe you're handing off a big workflow or a big role in ministry, and you know that this step is important because of this reason. And so for like scheduling here, let's just say you wanted to hand off your schedule to somebody else to do it. Well, one of the things to talk about is why is, okay, one of the steps is, making sure you put the right combination of musicians together. And you could say, hey, I don't schedule 3 altos. We just need 1 alto, 1 melody or soprano, and 1 tenor. And you tell them, maybe you have someone who doesn't understand this, and you teach them, okay, yeah, we can't have 3 altos singing together. We need this mix of people. That's kind of a silly example, but if somebody's making out your schedule who doesn't completely understand music, but you say, hey, this person is an alto, this person's soprano, this person's a tenor, we want to try to have a balance of those. So that's just a reason why, and that can help the person accomplish what they're trying to do. Also, a couple things is what triggers this step. All right. So for my assistant, what triggered this step, well, for me, of gathering my receipts, is when I got a receipt, if I was on the ball, I would take a picture of the receipt, even at like the coffee shop or wherever I was at, send it right on to my person. And then that was a trigger for her to then, catalog it wherever she needed to, save it wherever she needed to, and then do that next step of actually creating the form when it was time. And so if you have like a big thing that you're delegating to somebody, or parts of a ministry, like say your audition process. So when an application comes in, that triggered my assistant to actually to create a file for that person, print that application off, put it in the folder, and then put it on my desk. So I would make sure I'd look at it and then start the next step of the process. All right. So you think about what triggers each step of the way. And then also, what's the definition? What's the definition of done? All right. Running out of room here. What's the definition of done? Not the definition of done here, but what's the definition of done for each step along the way, all right? So what's done here? And then what's done for this next step? And then what's done there? All right, so think about that. So huge part of delegating is this workflow. If you have not planned out a workflow for your tasks, for your duties, for the things that you have to do, you'll never be able to delegate them successfully. Or if you eventually do get them delegated successfully, it takes a long time and it's a lot more headache. So workflow before you let go. That's the first tip. Let's do the second tip, and that's this, is to trust the math. All right. there is delegation math that we need to do. A lot of worship leaders think this. It's just quicker to do this myself, right? We think that way. And so one of the things that you need to think about is this. All right, like, one, is it better for me to do? And here's, let me give you just some thinking here is, if you think about this, am I the only one that can do this? And if the answer is no, then at some point as a leader, you need to be thinking about delegating it. Now, we don't delegate everything, obviously, but as you're working to be a more organized, a more effective leader, you got to start delegating some things. And so think about, if you have a high passion for something, like you love doing it, and then think about if you have a competency to do it. I'm just going to write competency here, and then also how important it is. All right, the importance of something. And so we have, this is a terrible Venn diagram here. Let me move this over. So there we go. All right, and here we go. We're going to try to Venn diagram this. All right, worst Venn diagram ever. But this is what we're looking for here. And if you want to be at a place where, you're doing as much work as possible in this middle area. And as you get further out, you might be somewhat competent at something here, but you just don't have a passion for it. But it might still be an important thing. All right. So you're still going to do it. But the further you get out from competency and passion and importance, the further you get out on this stuff, you want to look at saying, hey, I want to delegate this to somebody else. All right. So let me just get rid of this ugliness here. Oops. I'm going to set that up a little bit different so I can actually, having an eraser fail here. All right, so we're just going to get rid of all this so I can go on to my next point. So what we're going to do here now is I want to do the math. So again, it's quicker to just do it myself. And as you start to realize, okay, this thing isn't a high passion of mine. This thing isn't, critical in that I have to do it. It's also, other people can do it just as well as me, or maybe even better. So as you start thinking about that, and thinking, okay, even though I can do this quicker than other people, or I can do this quicker than trying to teach other people, if it's getting outside of that zone of genius for you, you need to start delegating it. Okay. And so let's just say that a task maybe takes you 30 minutes. All right. So each week, this certain task takes you 30 minutes. And so to teach someone to do this task maybe requires teaching them how to use a certain app or have a skill set. And that it could take you 3 hours just to teach your assistant or a volunteer to do that. Besides then teaching them, probably for the next 6 weeks, you're going to have to spend 30 minutes every week just making sure that they did it right, checking in with them, reviewing things, talking through it. And so what happens then is you'll have invested, probably 6+ hours to teach someone a 30-minute task. And it's then easy to go, okay, hey, this really is just better to do it myself, right? Because 6 hours to do a 30-minute task. Well, here's the thing. It's actually, that's math is good, because what's going to happen, you guys, is within 3 months, and you guys can check my math because I'm a worship leader, not a math major, but within 3 months, you're going to be ahead. We always talk about being money ahead on an investment. You're going to be time ahead. All right. So you will then start having that 30 minutes free to do other things. All right. So you're going to have those 30 minutes free. Now, this is important, having those 30 minutes free. All right. And, but what is more important is a lot of times we don't think about the emotional costs of this. There is an emotional cost besides just the time cost of doing things that maybe we aren't gifted at doing. Maybe they're not in our wheelhouse. You know, we've learned to do them, and we've learned to do them okay, or maybe even do them well. But they're not life-giving for us. And so if we get rid of that, it's more than just 30 minutes free. You are free of the emotional, maybe the soul-sucking thing that's going on there. You're free of that emotional drain that happens. All right. So don't just think about, okay, it's going to take me 6 hours to teach someone to do something that takes me just 30 minutes. Trust the math here, because eventually you're going to be time ahead, and that's important. All right, cool. All right. So that is tip number 2, trust the math. Tip number 3 is clear is kind. All right. That comes from a quote from Brene Brown. And she just says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so we want to be clear with expectations, outcomes, deadlines, and reviews. All right. Here's the thing, guys. Do not think that being nice and holding back is a good thing when you're delegating. You have to be very clear about, what you expect. So when you're delegating something, you got to be, have clarity on, hey, here's what I expect. Again, coming back to the workflow here. We've got, you've got to be clear on what needs to happen all the way from start to finish. So you also want to be clear on what the outcome is. Here's what I want done. Here's how it needs to look. Here's what it should, what it should be like. Just be as clear as possible when you talk about the outcome. Also, when it comes to the outcomes, you need to be clear on the deadlines. Here is what I need, and what it looks like, and I need it by when. So every month by the second Tuesday of every month, I want my schedule posted for the following month. So you're clear on the deadlines. And then this is the big one. This is where we get nice. And nice is not helping us, is reviews. We need to let people know, okay, that was okay. Here's what I really needed done on this. Here's where this is good. Here's where this is not so good. Here's where you need to work on to improve. But if we can work on not being nice in the review section, we're going to get to the place where, somebody is taking over. And I'm not saying you have to be mean, but we always try to, be quote unquote nice and say, and kind of beat around the bush with things. But again, think about that statement from Brene Brown: clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So we have to be clear when we're delegating to someone whether they've done a good job or not, how they've missed the mark, how they need to improve. All right. Hopefully we get that. This is one that's not fun for anyone unless you're just wired to be very direct. Most worship leaders, we're not wired that way. We're people pleasers, or we're just artists who we don't want to deal with people. But make sure you're super clear on your expectations, your outcomes, your deadlines, and especially when you review it. All right. Number 4. This one's pretty simple. When do you leave room for wiggle room? All right. And a lot of times you can give somebody, especially if it's a bigger task, the how they do it, the getting it done, is less important than the outcome. And so at some point, somebody may want to say, hey, I think I can do it this way and still get the same outcome. And so what I want to encourage you to do is, as you're delegating to someone, is say, okay, guys, let's follow this formula from information to imitation to innovation. And what that means is, hey, at first, I'm going to just give you the information of what needs to happen here, and get my pen working again. So the information is, this is the workflow. Maybe this is the what, the why, the how, all that. This is the steps that we need to do. This is the deadlines, the expectations, all of that. And so as they begin to do that, then they need to imitate how you do it. And by doing that, then they're going to learn. They're going to do the workflow that you've laid out and take the steps that you've done. But by doing that, they're going to start to see ways, especially if they're a more organized person than we are, they're going to start to see ways that they can then innovate. And they'll be like, hey, can I do this like this? Because I think I could save 20 minutes. And you look at it and you go, oh, why didn't I think of that? And that's a good reason to delegate to people, other people, especially that are more organized than we are. So yeah, go through that. And when it comes to the outcome, be very clear on that. You probably don't want a lot of wiggle room. All right. We don't want a lot of wiggle room there, but when it comes to the process, if they can come up with a process that's better, yeah, have all the wiggle room you want. But just first, at least learn it this way with the information, figuring out what they need to have. Then they imitate what you do, and then they can innovate. All right. So that's tip number 4 for delegating anything in your worship ministry. And then this last one is super important that we do, and that's assume ownership for their mistakes. All right. Whenever I'm delegating something to someone, if something goes wrong, when I was first doing this, if something went wrong, I went, what did they do? They messed this up. And usually I just went back to doing it myself. The person felt bad. And so it was not a good way to delegate. But eventually I got to the place where I realized, if somebody doesn't do well, this thing that I delegated to them, it's probably my fault. Either I wasn't clear, I didn't have the steps mapped out, I wasn't, I didn't talk about why it needs to be done a certain way and different things like that. So I always just assume I was not clear enough on either the expectations, what needs to happen. So I wasn't clear on the expectations, or I wasn't clear on the outcome. Hey, what should this actually look like? Or I wasn't clear about the deadlines. Hey, I need this done by this time. Or I wasn't clear when I was reviewing it with them. All right. And so whenever I'm delegating something, if I review something and go, oh man, this was not good, I have to think through, okay, where was I not clear? How, where should I have helped them? And eventually, if I get to the place where I feel like, I have done all this, I've gotten clear expectations, I've gotten clear outcomes, I've done clear deadlines, I've reviewed with them, and eventually I assume then ownership for one more mistake, and that was I picked the wrong person. And then that's on me to say, hey, you know what? I don't think this is the best fit for you to be doing this role. Let's maybe focus on you doing some other things, or, hey, I just don't think this is going to work out. I probably need to find somebody else. Those are never fun conversations to have. But again, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Ghosting someone and just ignoring them. Hey, did you still need help with this? And you just don't answer them. That's not cool either. All right. So let me review real quick. So workflow before you let go. Workflow is huge. We actually teach a lot of this in the Exceptional Every Sunday coaching group. Like how do we take our systems and workflow every part of it out? And then you need to trust the math. Just know that it's an investment. That's one of the things we also do in the Exceptional Every Sunday coaching group is we help help our leaders figure out, okay, what do you need to get off your plate? And what's the most important thing to get off your plate right now? It may not be the biggest time consuming thing or the thing you hate the most. You may still have to do that for a while. but we can strategically find things to take off your plate and help you delegate them to other people. And then also just helping, just being very clear about what you need, about your expectations, your outcomes, your deadlines, and then reviewing the work that the person did. And one of the things that we help our clients in the worship workshop or in the worship Exceptional Every Sunday coaching group is like they can talk through times when, hey, I've got this leader, I need to review this thing with them. And you know what? I don't even know what to say to them, but I know that I have to have this tough conversation. And so we have a community and we have some coaching that helps with that sort of thing. And then finally, we're on number 4 here. Know when to leave wiggle room, really kind of figuring out, okay, getting the right information to them, which is, of course, having the clarity and the workflow. So you get the right information to them and then they imitate that. And then as they're doing that, then they can innovate later the process, probably not the outcome, but they may even come up with a better outcome at some point. And so you want to make sure that you let go enough to let people innovate. And if you're kind of a hands-off person, your natural tendency might just be to say, hey, just innovate yourself, innovate it right away. But that's not good either, because that's letting them run wild, and you want to have those barriers and those guidelines in there. And then lastly, always assume ownership for their mistakes. So it doesn't mean they don't have responsibility as well, but whenever they do make mistakes with something you've delegated, go think through, okay, was I clear on the expectations? Was I clear on what the outcome looked like and what they were supposed to do? Was I clear with deadlines? And then did I review with them really well? And then eventually you may have to come to the place where, hey, I'm assuming ownership for the fact that I picked the wrong person. All right. So, hey, if you are at a place where you want to help get your worship ministry more organized, you yourself maybe want to be more organized, you want to get your systems and processes in place so you have actually more time to get the work of Sunday done and develop your team to help build them into the kind of team that can make every Sunday exceptional. What I want to do is, if you're feeling that way, I want to invite you into a call with me. It's a 15-minute session, and we can actually get a lot done in this session. So just go to this page. I'm going to write it out here. If you go to Worship Team Coach, WorshipTeamCoach.com and /ESA for Exceptional Sunday Assessment. All right. And that'll take you to a page where you can sign up for a time slot with me. And that page will actually tell you more about it. But we can talk about how you can really improve your team, get them moving towards a culture of excellence, and really build that band that can be exceptional every Sunday. All right. So head there now if you want to go ahead and book something. Otherwise, we'll see you again here on YouTube or wherever you might be watching this video. So we'll talk to you later. We'll see ya.